We're T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. We have to go for main engine start. 2, 1, 0. Booster ignition and liftoff of Shuttle Endeavour with NASA's final space station crew compartment that brings a bay window view to our celestial backyard.
Houston, Endeavour, roll program.
Roger, roll, Endeavour.
This is Mission Control Houston. Endeavour's roll maneuver is complete. It is now in a heads down position on track for its flight to the International Space Station. 28 seconds into the flight, Endeavour flying at 1,100 miles per hour, 1.3 miles in altitude, and 7 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, according to onboard computers. Endeavour's engines are throttling down as the orbiter passes through the area of maximum pressure on the vehicle.
Endeavour, go at throttle up.
Endeavour copies, go at throttle up.
The 3 main engines on board are throttling back up, now 1 minute 10 seconds in the flight. Endeavour flying at 1,800 miles per hour, 10 miles in altitude, 11.5 miles downrange. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters, and external tank weighed 4.5 million pounds. The total thrust at launch was 6,425,000 pounds. All systems continue to function well. 3 good main engines, 3 good power generating fuel cells, and 3 good auxiliary power units for the hydraulic system. The next step will be the burnout and separation of the solid rocket boosters. Combined, the twin boosters provide 5.3 million pounds of thrust to propel the orbiter toward space. Endeavour performance is as expected thus far. Booster officer confirms main engine cutoff.
Endeavour Houston, nominal MECO, ohms 1 not required.
Copy, nominal MECO, ohms 1 not required.
And the external tank has separated now.
Sound suppression water system armed. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis. A final visit to enhance the vision of Hubble into the deepest grandeur of our universe.
Bypass across the board, Scooter, no action.
Houston now controlling, Atlantis on its way. Atlantis on its way, all 3 engines now throttling down as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, no action on the MPS H2 out P.
Houston, we copy, no action.
Atlantis, go at throttle up.
Houston, Atlantis copies, go at throttle up.
7 miles in altitude. Altitude 49,000 feet. Flight control team discussing the minor transients that we're seeing at liftoff. All 3 engines are in good shape. The vehicle is headed downrange. All 3 hydraulic systems in good shape, as are the fuel cells. Atlantis is 18 miles and altitude, downrange 23 miles. Already traveling 2,500 miles per hour, approaching staging the burnout of the twin solid rocket boosters, which have been burning fuel at a rate of about 11,000 pounds per second. Solid rocket boosters have done their job. Atlantis is continuing in its due easterly course to catch up with the Hubble Space Telescope one last time.
T-minus 15 seconds. The sound suppression water system has been activated.
10. VLS is go for main engine start.
We have a go for main engine start. Main engine start. 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery, celebrating its 25th birthday by racking up science and supplies to the space station.
Houston now controlling the midnight ride of Rick Sturckow and his crew to the International Space Station. Discovery rolling on to the proper alignment for its 8.5-minute ride to orbit. 4.5 million pounds of hardware and humans taking aim on the International Outpost. "32 seconds into the flight. The 3 liquid fuel main engines soon will throttle back to 72% of rated performance, down in the bucket, reducing the stress on the shuttle as it goes transonic. Discovery 3.5 miles in altitude, 4 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center. Standing by for the throttle up call now from Capcom Eric Bowe.
Discovery. Copy, go ahead, throttle up.
The throttle up call acknowledged by Commander Rick Sturckow, joined on the flight deck by pilot Kevin Ford, flight engineer Jose Hernandez, and Pat Forrester. Seated down on the middeck are Danny Olivas, Christopher Fugelsang of the European Space Agency, and Nicole Stott, hitching a ride for 3 months on the International Space Station. 1 minute 50 seconds into the flight, standing by for solid rocket booster separation. Booster officer confirms staging a good solid rocket booster separation. Guidance now converging, the onboard computers steering the shuttle for its precise path to the International Space Station. Booster officer confirms a good main engine cutoff. Now standing by for external tank separation. External tank separation confirmed. Discovery now in its preliminary orbit. You can see the flash photography as Discovery fades away from the camera view. Good maneuver being commanded by Rick Sturckow, maneuvering Discovery so that those cameras embedded in the umbilical well can perform that flash photography of the discarded external fuel tank.
T-minus 15 seconds and the sound suppression water system has been activated.
10.
We have a go for main engine start. 3 engines up and ready. 3, 2, 1, 0. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery, blazing a trail to scientific discoveries aboard space station.
Houston, Discovery, roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
This is Mission Control, Houston. Space Shuttle Discovery is rolling into a heads-down position, putting it on course for 51.6 degree, 136 by 36 statute line orbit, and eventually the International Space Station. Discovery's 3 liquid-fueled main engines are now throttling down to reduce stress on the shuttle as it travels through the area of maximum dynamic pressure. Discovery is already at an altitude of 4.7 miles or 26,500 feet and traveling.
Discovery, go at throttle up.
Roger, go at throttle up.
Traveling 1,000 miles per hour. Discovery's engines are now throttled back up and performing at full capability. Discovery is now 21 miles away from its launch pad and 22 miles in altitude, traveling 2,700 miles per hour. All 3 main engines are working just as expected. The 3 fuel cells are generating power, and the 3 auxiliary power units are all producing pressure. In short, everything performing well. 2 minutes and 7 seconds into the STS-131 mission.
103 converged.
Firing chain is armed. Sound suppression water system activated. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
Houston now controlling. Atlantis begins its penultimate journey to shore up the International Space Station. Atlantis now in the proper alignment for its 8.5-minute ride to orbit. 4.5 million pounds of hardware and humans taking aim on the International Outpost. 30 seconds into the flight. Atlantis almost 2 miles in altitude, almost 6 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center already, traveling 500 miles an hour. The 3 liquid fuel main engines now throttling back to 72% of rated performance, going into the bucket, reducing the stress on the shuttle as it breaks through the sound barrier. 55 seconds into the flight, all systems operating normally, 900 miles an hour. The speed of Atlantis right now, 6 miles in altitude, 9 miles downrange.
Atlantis, go with throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
The throttle up call acknowledged by Commander Charlie Hobaugh, joined on the flight deck by pilot Butch Wilmore, flight engineer Randy Bresnick, and Leland Melvin. Seated down on the middeck are Mike Foreman and Bobby Satcher, kicking off their work week with a Monday commute to orbit. 1 minute, 30 seconds into the flight. Atlantis 13 miles in altitude, 15 miles downrange, traveling almost 2,000 miles an hour. Three good auxiliary power units, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good main engines. One minute, 50 seconds into the flight. 10 seconds away from solid rocket booster separation. Booster officer confirms staging a good solid rocket booster separation. Guidance now converging. Atlantis steering into the center lane of Highway 129 en route to the International Space Station. Standing by for main engine cutoff. Main engine cutoff confirmed by the booster officer. Standing by for external tank separation. And the bird's eye view from the external tank camera of external tank separation. Atlantis now in its preliminary orbit. Commander Charlie Hobaugh will now maneuver Atlantis so that cameras embedded in the shuttle's umbilical well can perform photography of the discarded external fuel tank. And Mike Foreman and Leland Melvin are about to use digital still and video cameras to capture handheld imagery of the tank for downlink a few hours from now. A flawless climb to orbit for the shuttle Atlantis and its 6 crew members en route now to the International Space Station.